So welcome everybody, kind of opening up the waiting room and getting ready for our meeting today. And we have a great presentation from BDO. We are going to keep everybody on mute and cameras off, actually, just to kind of keep it simplified and just focused on our BDO team today. And towards the end of the meeting, though, if you do have questions, if you want to raise your hand, obviously you can type them in the chat box as we go along today. And if you do raise a hand towards the end of the meeting, we can unmute, or you can, kind of come and have a conversation with our team here. So I want to turn it over to Trent and Mitzi. I'm going to kind of forward on here to their slide. And if you guys want to get started with the presentation, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Jennifer. My name is Trent Merrick. I am a tax partner with BDO. My official title is Tennessee Tax Market Leader, and essentially what that means is trying to have conversations with clients and targets about just relevant topics and driving business opportunities. What we wanted to do today was really kind of talk about what seems to be front and center with most of our client base, and that's honestly cash, and how do we maintain and preserve cash during the present pandemic environment. So we wanted to talk today about credits, incentives, and also some of the CARES Act provisions that were recently announced, as well as the Main Street lending. So we'll dive into that in greater detail as we progress over the next 45 minutes. Mitzi, do you mind introducing yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Trent. Thank you, Jennifer. My name is Mitzi Lovelace. I'm the Director of Business Development for BDO. And as you think about what does BDO do, and you think tax, audit, and advisory services, a BD is on every client account to ensure that all the services BDO offers are available to our clients, and that can be cybersecurity, forensic insurance, a bot for your VP of tax, so that when he gets up in the mornings, he sees everything he needs across the dashboard. So it's to bring all those services to fruition on each of our accounts. And this is one of my favorite subjects, because we do find a lot of credit incentives and grants for our clients, and I can't wait to cover it with you.
Perfect. Jennifer, next slide.
Great.
All right, so what we really want to do today at a high level is kind of share some thoughts relative to what we see as federal and Tennessee credits and incentives, what is generating cash flow for our customer base, our client base, and just kind of have a high level discussion. We're happy to have more detailed discussions on specific clients issues either after this call or sometime during next week. Chat questions as we go. We welcome questions. We're going to try to cover some actual pertinent client experience stories with you as well, so we can tell you what credits and incentives are, but also how we're seeing them actually applied into our client base. So that's kind of the learning objectives. Jennifer, next slide. All right, so we're going to cover three things really. Just an overview of the credits and incentives, what we see as best practices, and then get into some of the specificity around what opportunities may be available to customers and clients and targets. So Jennifer, next slide. All right, so just to start, what is a credit? What is an incentive? Credits are generally statutory in nature, meaning they are defined by law, where incentives are more discretionary. There's a whole laundry list of credits and incentives that we'll get into, most often driven off of either job growth or capital expenditures and investment into jurisdictions. Credits are generally directly reducing tax liability. Some credits are refundable credits, so meaning that you don't have to be in a tax paying position to qualify for a credit. It can be a refundable credit. The incentives in general are normally in the form of a cash grant based on a commitment by companies to commit either job growth or capital expenditures, as I mentioned. Jennifer, next slide. So here you'll see some of the typical credits in incentives. They can be employment-based. They can be in the form of training grants, research and development, sales and use tax exemptions. We'll touch later on when we get into specific credits about enterprise zone. And then you see the incentives as well, usually around either utilities or cash grants, as I mentioned. So I think we can go to the next slide, Jennifer.
When you start thinking about what are the credits, incentives, and grants, and what do I need to be watching for, there's some triggers that automatically should set you into this thinking process. What we typically find are, if you're looking at a new location or you're expanding your facility, that's a trigger. If you're creating new jobs, if you're investing in new property, a plant or machinery, also if you're developing workforce training or you're employing disadvantaged individuals. Let's say you're looking at different ways to power your plant or tow motors or forklifts with propane or biodiesel fuels. Those can qualify under green initiatives. Also, a lot of times, the way you're doing business changes to incorporate a new line. Let's say you're a manufacturing plant and you are going to develop a new product, and so you reshift your line so that it's more efficient. That can qualify. Same thing in the transportation industry. If you are looking at a new piece of GPS to put on your tractor trailers, that can set off an R&D credit. So these are the normal triggers. Next slide, Jennifer. A lot of these triggers are related to things like, thank you, mergers and acquisitions. We see many times one company will buy another one. It will have a huge data center. That data center or customer service center will automatically qualify for some of the things Trent and I are covering today. Going into a new facility or relocation, we see a lot of our companies here have relocated for other states because Tennessee has such great credit and incentives. And so they move their operations into Tennessee, or they merge. They may take Kentucky, Ohio, and merge them into a plant that they have existing here in the state. Every state is different, so they get credits in different ones. So any of these actions can land them into a new jurisdiction, which may qualify them for additional incentives. Also, we may see a new skill enhancement for new or incumbent workers, which will set off these triggers. So those are just some of the things to help you think through what could trigger when we need to look at this. Jennifer? This slide to me is very low. I know how many credit and incentive projects Trent and I have been on in the last 4 years, and to only see 610 projects in 39 states is shocking to me. I will tell you, Trent and I met with the commissioner about 4 years ago, and he told us that Tennessee had left $21 billion in credits, incentives, and grants on the table. And since I grew up here, that was heartbreaking news for me, that so many companies could have had available funds to keep their businesses moving forward, but just weren't aware of everything that our state offers. So when I look at this slide, you see that manufacturing is very incentivized in our state, but there's other services like business services and headquarter moves, warehouse and distribution and transportation. But just because the industry isn't on this slide does not mean you don't qualify. There is a lot of credit incentives. You'll see at the end of this presentation just a list of the ones we see most commonly. So I really want to leave a mark on you that look at this and look at it closely, because there's a lot of money out there. Next slide, please.
So here are the top 10 credits and incentive packages during 2019, and some of the numbers may be staggering to some. And it's really over the board. Like I mentioned earlier, these credits and incentives are driven off of two things: job creation and capital expenditure. So if you look at General Motors, for example, they had a $50 million incentive just based on a very sizable capital expenditure of $750 million, but they didn't create any jobs. Whereas you see a very low Fiat Chrysler of 1,400 job creation, but a low capital expenditure, and they still qualify for $27 million of incentives. So it's very diverse relative to the job growth and the capital expenditure. I remember back in 1993, I'm a Birmingham, Alabama kind of guy. I grew up, raised there. And when Alabama recruited Mercedes-Benz to the state, and they located their first U.S. automotive plant in Vance, Alabama, which is between Birmingham and Tuscaloosa. And there was just an absolute outroar of, why are we giving Mercedes $253 million in incentives to locate in Vance, Alabama? Actually cost the governor his position. He was voted out the following year after giving such a incentive. And now in today's terms, it seems very minimal. And the reward and the impact to the state of Alabama has more than paid for that $250 million investment. As Mitzi said, we meet with the Tennessee Economic Development Committee on a frequent basis, and they tell us, and I can't substantiate this number, but this is coming directly from them, that every dollar that they invest in companies in the state of Tennessee is returned $204 on each dollar of investment. So 204 times a return. And honestly, they partner with us to have conversations with companies because they want to continue to deploy that cash. As Mitzi said, Tennessee does not want to leave the money on the table because of future funding cuts. So they want to deploy all the capital that they possibly can within their budget so that they can get additional funding on a year-on-year basis. So just an interesting stat. Next slide, Jennifer.
So most of you have heard the story around Amazon and Amazon coming to the state of Tennessee, but let's go back to when Amazon first came into existence. We had something called the Amazon effect happen. And this huge distributor of retail revolutionized how we get so many different products, and they changed the way we use e-commerce. And the government noticed how revolutionary this was, and they began negotiating with Amazon, quite frankly, and some standards came out of that. And it was, if we're going to incentivize certain companies that have such a huge impact, then there has to be a ton of transparency around that. We have to stop the border wars between the states for these type of businesses. And we want to make sure these companies target jobs and increase opportunities, especially in our disadvantaged counties. We also want to make sure that the data centers are coming up and servicing these huge companies immediately. And around that became what we call the Amazon effect. Now, I will do a disclaimer here. Border wars are still very much alive. They're not alive in e-commerce. They are alive if we have a headquarter company contact us and say, Mitzi, Trent, we are thinking of moving our headquarters to Nashville, Tennessee. And we have looked at 3 or 4 other states as well, and we'd like to talk to you about that. The states will still get into a competitive bid to get that headquarter move or get that expansion or get those additional 25 plus employees. But as far as an e-commerce type business, the border wars have really settled down. But it is still very much applicable to what we see mostly in Tennessee and headquarter moves. Jennifer, one more slide, please. So created around the Amazon effect that I just went over were 2 opposing sides. The company who wants to know when we have these opportunities, these expansions, these moves, the consolidation workforces, are we getting incentivized like other companies? And a lot of times when Trent and I meet with the companies, we get asked, how much does the public get informed? So I can tell you that some of these credits, incentives, and grants are public in nature, like pilots, while others are never advertised and you don't see them, and there is no public data bank for them. So we go over that according to what the company wants out there and available. From the other side, we want to know as taxpayers, where is my money going to incentivize these companies, and is it being used in the manner that it was intended? Are they hiring are they in a disadvantaged county? Are they hiring workers who are desperately needing this type of job? And so these programs are monitored. The monitoring is not difficult. In fact, it's extremely easy for these programs, but there is a component of that. Trent?
No, totally agree. You know, I think if memory serves, when Amazon went on the second corporate headquarter route and Tennessee was proposing on that, you know, I think that ended up in Arlington, Virginia, but Tennessee got the back office of Amazon, and I think if memory serves, the state and county municipalities created about $110 million incentive and credit package to land that back office of Amazon. So, you know, real large dollars. You know, obviously they have a lot of buying power and clout, but it just goes to show that there is dollars out there for job growth and capital expenditures.
Right.
Okay.
Next slide.
Yep.
I just wanted to take one of those items and try to give you an impact. I could have taken all, you know, 8, 9 and given you a dollar amount, but just on data centers alone in 1 year, we were looking at 120 billion. So that's why it's so important when we have these conversations that we really understand what is the company spending money on, what are they doing. There was a time in my history that data centers would not have qualified, and now we see them as just a right and left. If you've got a customer service center in your business, let's say you're a trucking company and you're dispatching trucks to customers, or you have a call center and you're an airline, those data centers definitely are one of the components that qualify. Next slide, please.
All right, so before we get into the actual programs, let's talk about best practices. And this slide resonates with me based on the commentary on the right side. We have found time and time again, companies have pursued credits. They've been awarded credits, but yet the credits are never realized. And that is simply a result of improper paperwork, improper filing of documents in order to qualify and secure the benefits claimed. We have a client down in Smyrna. They built a $12 million warehouse facility. They thought they qualified. They filed the paperwork. It got approved, but then they never realized, they never monetized on the actual benefit because they weren't filing the paperwork correctly. And so when we talk about best practices, you know, we obviously talk about building, you know, your expertise, but then also having a systematic process in place to monitor, identify, but then also monetize the benefit by making sure that you are meeting your compliance requirements. Mitzi, anything to add on that slide?
Yeah, I think what we find a lot, Trent, and you kind of hit on it, is there is, when we go into these conversations, there is the belief that they may be taking the credit already. And most of the time that is true, that the company has filed for certain credits, but maybe left 7, 8, 9 other ones and not realize those. And to me, it's just a good practice to make sure, are you taking the right credits? Are you realizing those credits? And how are you implementing them? But also what we find is that most companies believe they have to be in a tax paying position. They have to be a taxpayers, or they think that their NOLs cause them not to be able to get these credits, and those are absolutely not true. A lot of times we can get credits, grants, and incentives, even if the company isn't in a tax paying position. We can also get a lot of these if they have a ton of NOLs on their books. So those are probably the common hurdles that we see, and there are ways to capture these even in those circumstances.
Absolutely. Jennifer, next slide. So the only thing I'll mention here, and I don't want this to sound like a BDO sales pitch, but if you're going to pursue these, I recommend getting an advisor that you can rely on and trust. And I'll give you a specific example. We have a large, well-known manufacturer of musical equipment, i.e. guitars, here based in Nashville. And they were pursuing a credit, and they got somebody internally to pursue the application. And they had been awarded a credit of about $250,000. And I just happened to be very good friends with the tax director, and I literally tackled him outside his office. And I said, do not execute that document. Let us look at it for you, because there's certain ways that you can present the information, and there are various ways to massage the data to present the company in its best light. And after we got done, they were awarded $854,000 of credit. And so, you know, my point simply is, you need to have somebody assist you on these endeavors to maximize your potential benefit, because if he had executed that document, he would have been about 3.5, 4 times undervalued of what was available with just a little bit of knowing how to submit the data. So, Jennifer, next slide. Mitzi, were you going to comment on that?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so now I think we'll turn our attention to some of the specific opportunities and credits and incentives that we see on a daily basis. And Mitzi, I think this is your slide.
I'm happy to cover this one. This is the disaster zone employee retention credit. We did see this fall off for a couple of years. They reinstated it. So it was open for 2017 and 18, and legislation has just opened it for 19 and 20 recently. This is for companies who were impacted by flood, fire, tornado, hurricane. Of course, the top disaster zone states will not surprise you. However, it may surprise you to know that Tennessee has definitely climbed up there in these. We've had so many tornadoes and floods and so many businesses affected that we are filing a lot. So it's $2,400 per employee, and this credit can be carried forward for 20 years. Next slide.
Mitzi, on that slide, Jennifer, you don't mind going back. I mean, we've had 3 or 4 conversations this week on this topic alone, and not only the employee retention credit, but do you mind talking about the insurance side of this as well? Because I don't want to limit this conversation to credits and incentives from a tax perspective, but it's really more cash available funding for companies. So if you don't mind touching on the insurance aspect that we just had that conversation yesterday with Clark.
I'll be happy to. One of the things that we see as part of the disaster zone is our clients have coverage for these events, but they also have coverage for, let's say, production or event coverage that they can utilize as well. We are seeing an uptick in clients who are not utilizing the full force of those coverages. We had one client that has 12 policies, and he didn't realize that there was a contagion policy embedded that we could utilize, and a political risk policy was also in his coverage. Both of those are happening to us right now. So the contagion policy may be buried, which is the COVID-19 and how it's impacting your business. The political risk policy is becoming huge because it is affecting the production and our events in our market. It is also, we have found money under marine coverage if you are a manufacturer or you depend on shipments coming into Long Island and your ship is setting parked and they won't let it offload due to COVID-19. It was estimated yesterday that there is $37 billion worth of goods on ships off our shores that are not allowed to unload right now due to COVID, and you may have coverage for those damages as you wait for your materials and other supplies. So just keep that in mind. Don't leave that money on the table either. Trent?
Yeah, Jennifer, next slide. Mitzi, but that's a fantastic point. Something that I didn't really realize until we started having that conversation about 3 or 4 weeks ago was the maritime provision. And we have a client that manufactures auto parts, and he was very concerned because he had a lot of product coming into the States on ships that were not being able to be ported and offloaded. And so we had that direct conversation with him about how do we look at your insurance policies from a maritime perspective and get reimbursement. So that was real cash savings to them. All right, so this has been around for a while, the Work Opportunity Zone credit, tax credit, the WOTC. Credits up to $9,600 per employee in qualifying groups. Qualifying groups are ex-prisoners and/or veterans are among the categories there, but just want to make sure that you guys are focused on your hiring, and if you are hiring people that are qualified into the WOTC program, to make sure that you're claiming the amount of dollars available. All right, next slide, Jennifer. Empowerment Zone employment credit. This is a federal and state program up to $3,000 per eligible employee. The purpose here is essentially to incentivize employment in traditionally poverty-stricken pockets of the country. You'll see that Tennessee is involved in the Federal Empowerment Zone credit program. And if you need additional information as far as what jurisdictions within the state of Tennessee qualify, just let us know. Jennifer?
So I'll quickly cover this. This is the 45S FMLA credit You'll see another one related to FMLA toward the end of this. This credit is for employers who pay family and medical leave. It's a 25% to employees while they're on qualified leave. The employer must have a written policy that guarantees a certain amount of paid family and medical leave to its employees. And this can be a carry forward of 20 years. Next credit.
All right, so we'll talk about a little bit of the CARES Act that was signed on March 27, and there's a couple of credits and cash saving opportunities involved with that. One is the employee retention credit, and that's up to $10,000 on employee wages at 50%. So capped at, as you can read, $5,000 per employee, and that's just really an incentive to retain your employee base during this pandemic. Next slide, Jennifer. All right, we're hearing a lot of conversation about the SBA, or some people refer to as the PPP. I refer to it as the SBA 7A program. This is for employers that have fewer than 500 employees. There's some restrictions if you're private equity based from an affiliations perspective, but essentially it gives companies an opportunity to qualify for a loan that is forgivable over a period of time. My knowledge is, as of yesterday, this program was capped out. It was about $349 billion, if memory serves. I think this money has temporarily been utilized, but there's a lot of talk that the program may be expanded on a go-forward basis. So if you have not identified this as an opportunity but are interested, just keep monitoring this situation, because like I said, I think there will be additional funding for this SBA 7A program. Jennifer?
This is the slide that I mentioned when we were going over the FMLA earlier. This one is related and came out as a result of COVID. It's paid sick leave and child care leave. Under the paid sick leave, it is normally for the employee who is in the parent or guardian position. There is a range between $2,000 and $5,000 per employee, depending on the reason for the needed leave. For the child care, it is 100% covered, and it is capped at $10,000 per employee. We are seeing the need for this. We have one client who has several people out, and so it's a way to reimburse. There are some qualifications around it. The credit has to be taken against the payroll deposits, and excess credit will be refunded through an expedited process. What we found out is that expedited process is about 6 weeks. Next slide.
All right, so there's a lot on this slide, and I apologize. Each one of these could have been a slide on itself, but given the timing and the rush to do this, we just threw this on the slide deck and would want to talk through this. All right, so I'll cover the first couple, and then Mitzi, you can jump in. Federal net operating loss carryback. So as part of the CARES Act, back in the tax reform that was signed in 17, it eliminated the ability for companies to carry losses backwards and extended them indefinitely forward. The CARES Act now says if you have a loss in 2018, 19, or 20, you can carry that loss backwards 5 years. So we're seeing a lot of companies take advantage of this new provision. Just make sure that you're aware of it. So if you're a calendar year, December 31, 2018 client, calendar year, you could carry back to 17, 16, 15, 14, 13. So you've got a 5-year carryback all the way back to 2013 to monetize that NOL against your federal income tax. Similarly, the alternative minimum tax, the tax reform of 17 eliminated alternative minimum tax and allowed for any kind of credit carry forward of AMT previously paid to be amortized and refunded over a 4-year period. The CARES Act now allows you to expedite that carryback and claim it over a period of 2 years, 50% in, let's see, 50% in 2018 with the remainder in 19, but there's also an ability to accelerate that into a full credit claimed on your tax return. So if you're in an AMT, if you've historically been in an AMT tax position, we have one client right now that is going to benefit for this $300,000 cash back upon filing their 2018 return. They are they're a fiscal year, so they're not delinquent. They're 7/31 year end, but they will monetize that benefit of $300,000. So if you're in an AMT situation historically and you have a credit carry forward, look to your advisor to potentially claim that as a refund.
The next few credits, and for you folks who have met with us, you know I get excited about this slide. You know I get excited about talking about these next few. I am passionate about job tax credits, performance grant, fast track grant, the electrical abatements, the pilot program. They're available to almost everyone. They incentivize our state. So just thinking about job tax credits. A lot of times I will sit down with folks, and I see on the list of people on the screen many friends, and they can tell you I can get quite excited around this topic. We will sit down with, let's say, the CFO, the VP of tax, and of course they've taken their job tax credit. What they haven't done is realized at times that that job tax credit could have been increased. If they're in a disadvantaged county, Tennessee has 4 different zones. They are incentivized differently, and we may look at a last filed state return and see that they've claimed $4,500 ahead when it should have been $16,000 ahead. So things like that, really get excited about finding that kind of money back to the company. In addition, based on what they're doing, how well their company is performing, the investments they're making in the state of Tennessee, we can usually pick up a very nice performance grant, which is a one-time grant, and that money is made available very quickly. Same thing with fast track. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on those because they're good money, they're well known, but there are ways to greatly increase. And then one that we see routinely not captured are your electrical abatements. If you're using a certain percentage of electricity, if you are making capital expenditures every year, year after year, if you have more than 25 employees, these electrical abatements can be huge. We worked with a company, and this is where I'll get into some storytelling. We worked with a company in upper state who was several $1 billion in size. They are with one of our major competitors. And we told them, we're not trying to unseat them. We're just trying to help you find some additional cash flow. We want you to stay with your current provider, but here you use $160,000 a month in electricity to run your facility. We think we can do something with that. We got that electrical bill reduced to $80,000 flat for the next 5 years. You do the math, and you will see that's millions back to that company. We do the same thing with property abatements with many of our clients. The pilot program, we usually get in with the county and city governments and get very good numbers here. So those few credits right there are highly sought after, large dollars. Trent and I, like I said, have been doing this probably 4 years, and I can't think of anything in that pool right there that was under 6 figures, if not 7 and sometimes 8. So these are really nice credits, grants, and opportunities for our companies. And with that, I'll take a breath and give it to Trent to cover the apportionment.
Yeah, sure. You know, we're finding companies, especially in today's environment, in looking forward to 2020, whether, you know, whether they're going to be in an income or loss perspective, and how do you maximize your losses or minimize your income vis-a-vis your state apportionment. And so we're seeing different ways to increase losses allocated to the state of Tennessee by adjusting certain elections on apportionment, or minimizing income allocated to the state of Tennessee by making favorable elections with respect to either single sales factor or minimization of your property and payroll. And then the other thing we're seeing quite frequently, and it's actually very surprising, because the alternative fuel credits have been out there from a federal perspective for years and years and years. They just got extended through 2020, and but companies that use propane in their manufacturing process. And when I say propane in their manufacturing process, I don't mean actually in their manufacturing process per se. I mean using propane to power forklifts to move product within their warehouses in their manufacturing process. And we're seeing hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's a fit, as I mentioned at the first of the discussion, this is actually a refundable credit. Doesn't matter if you're in an income tax position or not. 50 cents per gallon of propane used in a production process. And we're seeing hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. We've got a client down in Shelbyville that manufactures automotive products for primarily Nissan, and they're sitting on a 4-year opportunity of about $1.2 million of refundable credit just on propane alone. So these dollars are real, and if you're using any type of propane in your production process, we need to have a conversation about that. There's a process that you have to go through to qualify. You have to become an alternative fuel user. You have to get qualified through the IRS. That's a step in the process, but once you do that, you're assigned a number, and then it's simply claiming that on your federally filed tax return. One thing that's not on this list, but I'll cover briefly, is the Main Street loan program. And this is comparable to the SBA 7A. It's intended to give companies a means of financing. There's a new program and an expanded program. So my understanding is if you have any type of term debt on your books, then you would qualify under the expanded program. The expanded program allows you to borrow over a 4-year period at an interest rate of somewhere between 2.5% and 4%, depending on what you can negotiate with your lender, up to 6 times your EBITDA, and up to a maximum of $150 million. We were actually on a call this morning with the CFO of one of our clients having this exact conversation, and they are very interested, just from a liquidity perspective, at a very favorable discount. Unlike the SBA 7A, there is no loan forgiveness component to the Main Street lending, but there is a 12-month initial deferral on payments initially. So if you want more information on that, I've got a couple of term sheets that I'm happy to send out. So just let us know. And with that, Jennifer, I think that is all of our prepared remarks, we're happy to open up to discussions or questions. I see the chat box is lit up, but I haven't been following the chat, but I'm happy to address any questions at this point.
Yeah, I think if you'd like to just turn off your microphone or turn on your microphone, whichever way this was to go, you can actually talk, or you can raise your hand or type something in the chat area if you have a specific question. So anybody want to let me know you want to be unmuted, just please type that in.
Jennifer, I think I did see one question pop up if the slide deck was going to be available. We're happy for you to share that with the group, so feel free to do so.
Okay, I sure will. Someone also was asking, when will the new 250 billion be appropriated? Great question, right?
For the SBA 7A?
Right.
Yeah, I'm not sure, based on my conversations with my banking friends, that's expected, but it hasn't been voted on and approved as of yet, to my knowledge. So hopefully shortly, very similar to the Main Street program, the comment period ended, I believe, last night. And so there's overwhelmment with the group processing all the SBA 7A loans. So they're hoping to have comments back in an FAQ back to the group first of next week. There's no official loan application for the Main Street program at this point, but we advised our client this morning to kind of think through the process. And what I mean by that is he's got to have conversations with his existing lender because of debt covenants. He has to get board approval. And we're recommending to him that get your ducks in a row, get it figured out now, get all your approvals, get all your concessions, get everything you need to be lined up today, so that when you get the application first of next week, you're first in line to be able to qualify for the loan, because our thought process and experience is that the funds, the $600 billion that are allocated to this Main Street program, are going to be very similar to the SBA 7A, $349 billion, and they're going to go fast, especially if companies are eligible to borrow up to $150 million per company. Those funds are going to be exhausted very quickly. So you need to be doing if you want to take advantage of that liquidity, you need to be doing what you need to do today in order to be prepared to act immediately when the application is available.
So do you think
many of you have multiple banks that you deal with, unlike the SBA loan, which you needed to go directly to your current bank? With the Main Street lending program, if you would, I would reach out to your various banks and see what they offer you, because we are seeing some competition around this loan. So if you bank with 3 banks, I would reach out to all 3 and see what they offer you, since there is some movement between 200 and 400 points, and use that to your advantage competitively.
Mm-hmm.
So if a company applied for the PPP loan and they ran out of money yesterday, do you think that will be some new money will be put into the pot for that one as well as the Main Street?
Again, we think there will be additional funding, but obviously Congress is going to have to vote on that to appropriate the funding. To date, I know there are petitions going about from bankers to Congress asking for additional funding. I have heard it's about $250 billion, but to date, I'm not aware that there's been any action by Congress to fund that additional SBA 7A program.
Well, it's interesting times. So thank you guys for joining us for this virtual meeting, and we'll have another virtual meeting soon for the Nashville chapter. Don't forget, and by the way, I do manage the Southeast chapter, so reach out to me anytime if you have any questions. And check our website, because all the programs now are opened up for during the COVID-19 time for everybody to view our webinars. And of course, CFOLC members do get the CPE credit. We have a great virtual membership for those that aren't members already. And I look forward to seeing you back here for the next Nashville program.
Perfect.
Thank you so much, Mitzi and Trent. Have a
Thanks, everyone.
day.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I was just trying to read all these. I can't keep up with the chat. You know.
Yeah, I read it. We're still on.
Yeah,
I'm gonna hit the leave meeting, and I will see you back on Skype. Thank you so much, Jennifer. That was wonderful. You're a wonderful host.
Jennifer, did that go okay from your perspective?
Yeah, I thought it was great.
Okay, great.
Covered a lot of ground, and
Yeah,
it's okay to not have questions because you probably answered everything.
it was tough to get into too much specificity on these things, but if anybody circles back to you and asks questions or needs additional information, we're happy to provide.
Okay, I'll keep in touch.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good
Take
weekend.
care. You
Bye-bye.
too.
You too.